Okay, some of you may know that I've been working on some kind of crazy project that may very well be well beyond my actual ability to do. So this is it. You can see I have a city-like area. Not everything in this is really part of the game. The cube, the flying colored squares, and the skyscrapers have no connection to the logic. They're just part of some stuff I did to learn OpenGL, and I brought them back in for this because it makes it look a little cooler, a little more interesting than just the buildings. But the idea was to create my own city builder game. Not a really simple one, but a fairly advanced commercial quality city builder game. And while I probably could have put together some kind of simple arcade style game, a Pac-Man clone or something similar, uh, quite easily and been done by now, this probably really is quite a bit beyond me. In fact, I had the idea for several years and thought it was something that I couldn't do. I just wrote it off as I couldn't do it. I was probably right. As far as where the idea comes from, several years ago I was into the game Simcity Societies. That game didn't really get very good reviews. A lot of people didn't like it because it wasn't SimCity and it had SimCity in the name, basically, even though it was really a very fun game and it was really an interesting idea. I would say kind of a great new idea that takes the city building genre in a new direction. And in a way, that was really a very good thing. Anyway, I started thinking about simply ways you could make that better, and really cool ways to mod it. And then I started coming up with ideas that were beyond what you could probably do modding it. And then ultimately, started thinking in terms of, wouldn't it be great if someone could make a whole new game? And so I ditched all the sort of core mechanics or core features and started coming up with a completely different system. Just basic stuff that you could easily get from real life, like people having houses and going to work and going to places for fun. That stays, because that is pretty much just something you see in everyday real life. But um, I was at that point decided just throw out all the stuff about societal energies and the fairly limited archetype system where there are a handful of specific archetypes you can get that redecorate your city instantly, everything at once. I decided that there was a better way to do a lot of that than using energies and archetypes. As for what's happened since then, I would have loved to it if Tilted Mill had done a sequel to SimCity Societies, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not sure if Maxis will not Maxis, but EA rather, will let them. We do have the new SimCity from Maxis, which has gotten horrific reviews. And while I am absolutely certain that the people who did it are vastly more skilled technically than I am, I think they made a few conceptual mistakes. I think maybe their head was a little too far in the clouds, and also that they tried to please everyone and they ended up doing something that really pleased no one, or at least very few people. I think they did do some things that could have been done more efficiently, like, radius effects are actually more realistic for some things and worked 20 years ago. They could still be used today. The idea of little balls of electricity walking down the street is neither realistic nor do I think it really adds a whole lot of enjoyment to gameplay. And I don't see how that could really be that efficient, creating all these entities and steering them down a road. But looking at what seems to have been done with the new SimCity, I had the idea you could take that type of game genre in two different directions. One would be to focus on what you might call smaller scale, higher detail, finer resolution, which is more or less what societies did, where you could see all the individual Sims and they had their own homes, and you could follow them around and see what mood they were in and so on. Or you could take it in the other direction, Um, Larger scale, lower detail, maybe have multiple cities that could run it, even possibly run at one time. And I think that would be a good idea. I suspect that one of the problems they had with the new SimCity is they tried to expand in both directions, and they ended up with something where you have all these agents running around on their own, but they're really directed by the city. They're not really independent. They're just directed by the city, and so they seem really dumb. They just go to the first job available and go home to the first house available. So they're basically all homeless, just squatting wherever they can um, find a house. And they don't really seem to do anything because they're really just an extension of the city. At the same time, in order to get all those agents and have that level of detail, they couldn't make it big enough for the people that want huge, expansive cities with grandiose skylines and so on. So they ended up not pleasing either crowd, and not necessarily doing things in the most efficient way either. I mean, having balls of electricity walking down the road is neither realistic nor what I imagine very efficient, compared to using a much simpler system that would have worked 20 years ago and would still be both more realistic now and more efficient now. But I often think that the idea of the city builder genre could be sort of split in two different directions, and these would be two separate games. But I think it would be a good idea to have SimCity done by Maxis and SimCity Societies as a separate series branched off done by Tilted Mill, and to have Maxis do the SimCity per se, where you have the large city and you're focusing mostly on things like logistics and economics and building roads and zoning things and that sort of aspect of it, and have a Society sequel done by Tilted Mill if EA would let them, and they could still be the publisher and collect money off of it that way. And that would focus more on the people, and the Society be the smaller scale, higher resolution version, sort of in between SimCity and The Sims. And I think that would be wonderful, but I don't think that's going to happen. Anyway, the idea was to take the city generation genre, not in the direction that Cities XL does, but take it away from the SimCity idea in the same direction that Societies did, but further. And make it into a social engineering game. Ditch all the societal energies, though. Focus more on simulating at the level of the people, though of course there would be a lot of them. You wouldn't be able to create or control them the way you would in The Sims. It would focus on the society as a whole, but be modeled at the level of the people. And instead of societal energies, you'd have a moderately large number of memes that would have various effects. And I actually have a pretty good idea how to do that. The problem is that I've run into a lot of trouble with pathfinding, which unfortunately does have to be done using floating points and functions that take the computer a long time to process. What some people call expensive computationally functions, and also is something that I have no real knowledge of. So I had the idea of several different AIs. One would be for roads, which have never been implemented because you see there are no roads, and it would simply be a fairly traditional AI, except that it would store the information in a data table, and you'd have, based on what section of road someone was standing on and where they're trying to get to, it would tell them which way to go. And then for off-road, they were supposed to do something sort of like if they're trying to get from here to here. It would try a straight line. If that doesn't work, it would detect what was in the way and then shoot for the corners and just break it down bit by bit like that. Even though it seems simple enough, I've had trouble really getting it to really work. Otherwise, they get stuck wandering and just can't find their way. Anyway, I think it would be really a great idea to take, if maybe things were to have this sort of game based on memes and all these people. They have personalities. There are already a few effects on their behavior, though it's hard to tell when they all look the same. They do have set homes, set workplaces. They do potentially have interests, though that has not actually been implemented. There's a very preliminary list of memes that was meant to evolve as I develop buildings. You can see these are houses, workplaces, um, fun areas. They're very generic. None of these were meant to stay. These are just very simple stand-in models, just as are the tombstone-looking people that just approximate the area a person would fill. There are a few other things. I do think a good idea would be to use the same kind of controls you use in a first-person shooter in these games, just flying, or for that matter in a block placing game or some RPGs. As you can see, I'm flying around. I can go up and down. I can look any way I want. This is a really great way since you are in 3D. The old way of just using the mouse, moving around the screen, and pressing on the edge of the screen to move, I don't think is really such a good idea. I think they need to modernize quite a bit. Or at least abandon being stuck in that. One thing about Simcity Society is it had pretty great graphics, even if some of them were a little exaggerated or cartoonish, and you could move around, but it wasn't very user-friendly because they tried to combine using the mouse as a pointer and using the mouse as a controller. The way I have gotten around this is you can use it with this as your pointer to select things like so, but if you really want to use it in the more traditional mode, I can hit H for hover. Movement is disabled, but I can now move this cursor around, or this pointer, or whatever you want to call it. And then hit H, and I'm back in fly mode. Similarly, I like the idea, if you do have nice buildings and nice layout, to be able to walk through it. So as a convenience, even though you could fly down and just fly around, I have G. Hit G for gravity mode, and it puts you in a first-person kind of setting where you really cannot, where the up and down is disabled, but automatically keeps you at a fixed height for the ground, which would be much more important if you had different heights for the ground, which I was hoping to do. And hit G again, and you're flying. And even adjust your speed to fit. I have it if you hit tab, you can go to a mode where you can swoop and soar with your pitch, and hit tab again, and that's off. And you can even adjust your speed. So if I use the mouse wheel, I can greatly increase my speed up to about 1,000 miles an hour. If I click it, I go back to default, and then if I roll it the other direction, I can go all the way down to 5 miles an hour. And this also works when you are on the ground, so if the default ground speed is enough, you can go at any of the regular speeds. So I think you could do something like that, and you could also use the number keys to select menus, and in menu mode would be very much like hover mode, just with a different variable, so you wouldn't have to worry about switching out of hover mode when you left your menu. If you were in hover mode, you could probably have it to where you could also select menus that way. But yeah, using the mouse and fully using the keyboard and the way you would in a shooter or a role-playing game or a block placing game would also be a really great idea. And I would love it if someone actually did that. Who knows, maybe one of these days I may get back to it if no one else does, if I get more skilled or have some more insight, or meet up with someone I trust who can fill in some of the areas I don't know. But for now, that's an explanation of what I was trying to do and why I'm probably not going to be able to finish it. It really is something that requires someone with a lot more skill and experience than I have, and very possibly a whole team of people, because that's how it's usually done. But for now, I'll just leave you with this view of the algorithmically generated temp city that I came up with to test, and it does change each time, and the cube and the dots and the skyscrapers. So this will probably be the last you see of any of this, at least for a while, because I have to take a break from it. I'm really not getting anywhere. So there you go.